The man in yellow was never the biggest threat. Every season has pushed us to believe that he is the one controlling everything inside the town. Every death, every nightmare, every monster, all of it seems to point back to him. But what if that's exactly what the town wanted us to believe? What if Season 5 is finally going to reveal that someone or something has been controlling even the man in yellow this entire time? And what if the only way to destroy the monsters forever is to make a sacrifice so devastating that the survivors may wish they had never escaped at all? Because once you connect the cave, the bones, the Faraway Tree, the red lightning, Victor's drawings, and the forgotten history of the town, one terrifying theory begins to emerge. The curse isn't ending because the heroes are finally winning. It's ending because the cycle has almost reached its final stage. And that could be the most dangerous moment of all. Season 5 has the perfect opportunity to answer the biggest mystery the series has been building since the very beginning. Not simply where the monsters came from, but why they continue to exist after so many different generations have tried to stop them. Every cycle introduces new people, every cycle creates new victims, and every cycle seems to repeat almost the exact same events with only a few small differences. At first, this looked like simple bad luck, then it looked like destiny. But now it feels much more intentional. Someone is making sure the cycle continues. Someone benefits every time the town starts over again. The question is no longer who survives the monsters. The real question is who created the rules that even the monsters have to follow. That's where the man in yellow suddenly becomes much more interesting. Throughout the story, he acts powerful, but he never behaves like someone who has complete freedom. He appears only when certain events happen. He waits until specific moments before interfering. He protects the cycle more than he protects himself. If he truly ruled this place, why would he allow the survivors to keep discovering new clues every season? Why wouldn't he simply eliminate everyone immediately? The answer could be that he isn't allowed to. He may simply be the caretaker of a system that was created long before he ever appeared. That would also explain something strange about the monsters themselves. They hunt people every night, but they don't act like wild creatures. They smile. They speak calmly. Sometimes they even seem curious instead of angry. They follow rules that nobody has fully explained. They never rush without purpose. They don't destroy everything around them. Instead, they almost behave like actors performing the same play over and over again. Imagine if these monsters are not the real villains at all. Imagine if they are actually prisoners trapped inside bodies that no longer belong to them. Their human memories have disappeared, but tiny fragments could still remain somewhere deep inside. That would completely change the meaning of the curse. Instead of creating monsters, the curse may actually be trapping human souls inside an endless nightmare. Every night they repeat the same hunt because something forces them to. They aren't choosing violence anymore. They're obeying something much older than themselves. This is where the mysterious bones become incredibly important. Most viewers focused on the fact that they seemed connected to protection, but what if they were never meant to protect people directly? What if they were actually acting as chains that kept an ancient force sealed beneath the town? Once those bones were removed, the balance immediately started changing. Strange weather appeared. The sky turned unnatural. The atmosphere itself felt different, almost as if the town had started waking up after centuries of silence. That reaction seems too extreme if the bones were only ordinary magical objects, but if they were part of an ancient prison, then everything suddenly makes sense. Removing them didn't free the survivors. It may have freed the true source of the curse, and that's where Victor's drawings become impossible to ignore. For years, we've treated his pictures like memories, but Season 5 could reveal that many of them are actually warnings. Victor never explains everything because he doesn't fully understand what he's seen. He draws pieces of different cycles mixed together. That's why some pictures seem disconnected from current events. They're not showing one timeline. They're showing multiple timelines bleeding into each other. Hidden among those drawings could be the first appearance of the real villain, disguised as nothing more than a strange shape covered in red. Everyone assumed it represented danger in general, but what if it was always depicting the same entity watching every cycle from the shadows? If that's true, then the man in yellow may have spent decades distracting everyone from the real enemy. And by the time the survivors finally realize the truth, the curse may already be entering its final phase, one where ending it will demand a price that nobody is prepared to pay. If this theory is true, then the next question becomes even more terrifying. What exactly is the price of breaking the curse? Because every time someone inside the town gets close to discovering the truth, the town immediately demands something in return. Think about it. Whenever the survivors make real progress, they never receive a reward. Instead, they lose someone important. It's almost like the town is balancing itself. One answer always comes with one sacrifice. One breakthrough always creates an even bigger tragedy. That pattern has repeated for so many seasons that it can no longer be ignored. And Season 5 may finally explain why. The curse was never designed to keep people trapped forever. It was designed to make sure that only those willing to sacrifice everything could ever destroy it. The problem is that no one has ever been willing to pay the full price. Every previous cycle reached the same point before collapsing. Someone always hesitated. Someone always tried to save everyone instead of making the impossible decision. That single moment of hesitation may be the reason the entire cycle starts over again. Now think about what happened after the red lightning appeared. The sky didn't simply change color. The entire atmosphere of the town felt different. Even the monsters seemed less predictable than before. It's almost as if something older had finally awakened. That could mean the curse has entered its final stage. Instead of hiding behind symbols and mysteries, the force controlling everything may now begin acting directly. And that would explain why the man in yellow suddenly becomes much more aggressive. Not because he is growing stronger, but because he is running out of time. If the curse is truly close to ending, then his purpose inside the cycle is almost complete. His mission has always been to keep the balance intact, but once that balance begins to collapse, he has no choice except to interfere personally. This could be the first time we actually see fear in the man in yellow himself. Imagine the one character everyone feared suddenly becoming afraid of something else. That also brings us back to the monsters. What if the reason they smile all the time has nothing to do with enjoying the hunt? What if those smiles are simply frozen expressions left behind after the curse stole their humanity? Season 5 could finally reveal that these creatures were once ordinary people who believed they were doing the right thing. Maybe they accepted immortality to protect their families. Maybe they thought they were saving the town, but instead they became the first victims of the curse itself. Their bodies survived, but their minds disappeared. Now imagine what happens if the curse begins breaking. Tiny fragments of those memories could slowly return. Suddenly, the monsters wouldn't just be enemies anymore. They would become living evidence of the town's forgotten history. Some of them might even recognize places, names, or people connected to previous cycles. That would completely change the way the survivors look at them. Destroying a monster would no longer feel like killing a creature. It would feel like ending the suffering of someone who has been trapped for generations. This is exactly where Boyd's story becomes incredibly important. From the beginning, Boyd has carried more responsibility than anyone else. Every decision he makes affects the entire town. Every failure becomes his burden. Every death stays with him. Season after season, we've watched him refuse to give up, even when everything around him falls apart. But what if the curse has been preparing Boyd for one final decision all along? Think about how often he has been forced to choose between one life and many others. Those weren't random situations, they may have been tests. Every impossible choice was shaping him into the only person capable of making the sacrifice that no one else could make. Because if ending the curse requires someone to willingly remain behind, while everyone else escapes, Boyd is the one character who would actually do it. He would never let someone else carry that burden if he believed he could save the town instead. And then there is Ethan. Many viewers still see him as just a child caught in something far beyond his understanding. But Season 5 may finally prove that Ethan has been one of the most important pieces of the puzzle from the very beginning. He doesn't look at the town the way adults do. He understands stories, symbols, and impossible events without immediately rejecting them. Time and time again, Ethan has noticed connections that everyone else ignored. What if that wasn't simply because he has a good imagination? What if children can naturally perceive the rules of the curse before years of logic teach them to ignore what they see? That would explain why Ethan keeps finding clues hidden inside stories. The town itself may actually communicate through symbols instead of direct answers. Adults search for evidence. Ethan searches for meaning. And in a place where reality bends around belief, meaning may be far more powerful than evidence. Now imagine these storylines finally colliding. Boyd discovers the truth behind the sacrifice. Ethan realizes where the final step must happen. Tabitha begins recovering memories that don't even belong entirely to her own lifetime. Julie starts understanding how different cycles connect across time. Victor finally recognizes one drawing he never understood as a child. None of these events alone would end the curse, but together they could unlock something that every previous cycle failed to achieve. For the first time, the survivors wouldn't just be reacting to the town, they would finally understand the rules well enough to challenge them. And if that moment really happens, then the real villain may have no choice but to reveal itself. Because hiding in the shadows will no longer be enough once the people trapped inside the town finally learn the truth behind the curse. But there is one mystery that still refuses to fit with everything else: the Talismans. Ever since they first appeared, everyone has treated them as simple protection against the monsters. Hang one inside a house, close the door, and somehow the creatures stay outside. For a long time, that looks like the end of the story. But the more we learn about the town, the stranger those stones become. Nobody knows who carved them. Nobody knows who placed them inside the cave, and nobody has ever explained why they work. If the monsters are supposedly controlled by the curse, then why would a few carved stones be able to stop them? It almost feels like the Talismans weren't created to fight the monsters at all. They were created by someone who understood the rules of the curse long before anyone living arrived in the town. And that completely changes how we should look at them. Maybe the Talismans were never magical weapons. Maybe they were pieces of something much larger that has been hidden across every cycle. Now imagine what really happened after the chaos surrounding the Faraway Tree. Everyone assumed the Talismans were simply gone forever. Some believed the town had taken them away. Others thought the man in yellow had destroyed them to make the survivors helpless. But what if neither explanation is true? What if the Talismans were never actually lost? What if the Faraway Tree did exactly what it has always done? It moved them somewhere else according to rules that nobody fully understands. We've already seen that the tree doesn't simply transport people from one place to another. Sometimes it sends them where they need to be rather than where they want to go. If it can bend space, who's to say it can't bend time as well? That opens a shocking possibility. The missing talismans may have been sent back into an earlier point in the cycle, eventually becoming the very same talismans that Boyd discovered in the first place. In other words, the stones may exist inside a closed loop. They were never created by someone in the past. They survive because each cycle quietly sends them backward to begin the next one. If that's true, then the talismans aren't just protective objects, they're proof that time inside the town doesn't move in a straight line. Every cycle feeds the next one, and the next one feeds the previous one. That would explain why certain events always repeat with small differences. The town isn't simply reliving history. It's constantly rewriting itself while preserving the same key pieces: Victor's memories, the children's voices, the lighthouse, the cave, the Faraway Tree, and now the talismans themselves. Every one of these elements seems to survive from one cycle into another, almost like someone is making sure the puzzle can never completely disappear. But here's the terrifying part. If the talismans only exist because the cycle continues, then breaking the cycle could erase them forever. The very objects that kept everyone alive may vanish the moment the curse is destroyed. This also changes how we should think about the man in yellow. Throughout the series, he appears whenever the balance of the town is threatened. But notice something important. He never seems interested in keeping the monsters alive for their own sake. His priority is protecting the cycle. That means if the talismans are essential to maintaining that loop, he may actually need them to exist. Suddenly, his actions make much more sense. He doesn't remove every advantage from the survivors because some of those advantages are necessary for history to repeat itself. The survivors believe they're making new choices, but many of those choices may already be part of the design. The real villain doesn't win by killing everyone. It wins by making sure the story always reaches the same ending before starting over again. And this is where the final confrontation could become unlike anything we've seen before. Instead of fighting monsters one by one, the survivors may finally realize that their greatest enemy is the cycle itself. Destroying creatures won't end the nightmare. Escaping the town won't end it either. They have to break the rule that keeps history repeating. That could require them to refuse the choices every previous generation accepted. Imagine Boyd standing in front of the people he has protected for so long, knowing that saving them today might condemn countless future victims. Imagine Tabitha realizing that the memories returning to her aren't simply visions, they're echoes from people who tried and failed before her. Imagine Julie using everything she's learned about moving through different points in time, not to erase the past, but to prevent the cycle from resetting once again. For the first time, every major character would be solving a different part of the same mystery. Then comes the twist that could redefine the entire series. What if defeating the real villain doesn't instantly free everyone? What if breaking the curse causes the town itself to begin collapsing because it only existed to contain that ancient force? Roads disappear, buildings crumble, the forest changes, the monsters stop moving, not because they're dead, but because the power controlling them has finally vanished. Some may even regain flashes of their human identities in their final moments, revealing that they were victims long before they became hunters. It would be heartbreaking, but it would also complete the central mystery of the show. The curse didn't create monsters out of evil people. It turned desperate people into monsters and trapped them in an endless loop. And that's why Season 5 could become the most emotional chapter of the entire series. The biggest victory may demand the greatest loss. If the curse truly ends, someone may have to stay behind to make sure it never returns. Whether that's Boyd, Tabitha, or someone nobody expects, the cost could be permanent. The survivors may finally walk out of the town, but they'll never leave unchanged. They'll carry the memories of every person who never escaped and every sacrifice that made freedom possible. And when the final scene arrives, we may discover that the true villain was never just the man in yellow, never just the monsters, and never just the town itself. It was the endless cycle that convinced every generation they had no choice. Season 5 may finally prove that the only way to defeat the darkness is to refuse to repeat the story one more time. And if that theory turns out to be true, then everything we've watched since episode 1 has been leading to this single moment.